Hello everyone and welcome to my Y&R Trends channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The Monday, October 13th, 2025 episode of The Young and the Restless opens in Genoa City with an uneasy calm, the kind that suggests storms are gathering beneath the surface. The morning sun spills through the Abbott mansion windows, where Jack sits alone at the table, reading a message from Kyle that leaves him uneasy. Kyle's absence from the family dinner last night didn't go unnoticed, and now Jack is beginning to fear that the tension between father and son might be heading toward another painful rift. Across the room, Diane senses something's wrong and gently touches Jack's hand, trying to reassure him that Kyle just needs time. But Jack, who has learned that peace in Genoa City never lasts long, knows better. He mutters that time doesn't heal anything when deception is involved. Diane, visibly shaken, wonders what he means, but Jack only says, "I just hope our son isn't making another mistake he'll regret." Meanwhile at Society, Kyle sits alone nursing a coffee that's long gone cold. He's staring at his phone, reading and rereading a message from Summer that he still hasn't responded to. Their relationship has been hanging by a thread ever since her discovery that he's been secretly consulting with Victor Newman about business moves at Genoa. Kyle knows how it looks, betraying his own family, but he tells himself that Victor's guidance could open doors for him that Jack would never approve of. As he sits lost in thought, Audra walks in, her confident smile cutting through his gloom like a blade. She slides into the booth across from him and says she's heard whispers that Genoa's about to make a huge change in leadership. Kyle feigns surprise, but Audra isn't fooled. She leans closer, her voice dropping to a silky whisper, saying she knows he's positioning himself for control. Kyle doesn't deny it this time. Instead, he tells her that sometimes you have to take power before it's taken from you. Audra smiles, the kind of smile that suggests danger and opportunity are the same thing in her world. Over at Newman Enterprises, Victoria is pacing her office, frustration visible in every movement. Nate has been avoiding her calls all morning, and the silence is eating away at her composure. She knows he's been distant since their last argument about loyalty, both in business and their relationship, but she didn't expect him to freeze her out completely. When he finally walks in, Victoria doesn't waste a second before confronting him. Nate insists he's not playing games. He just needed space to think about what they've become. Their professional partnership has turned toxic, tangled in emotion and mistrust. Victoria, always trying to maintain control, asks if this means he's quitting Newman Media. Nate hesitates before replying that maybe he's quitting her. The words hit her harder than she'd like to admit, and for a brief moment, the ICCO facade slips, revealing the woman who's tired of losing everyone she loves to ambition. Nate starts to walk out, but Victoria stops him and asks if he's leaving her for Elena again, or if this is about the Newmans always needing to dominate. Nate simply says, "Maybe it's about me finally choosing myself." He leaves and Victoria's expression hardens, pain morphing into determination. She whispers to herself that no one walks away from her without consequences. At the coffee house, Sharon is wiping down tables when Chance walks in, dressed casually but clearly distracted. She greets him warmly, noticing the exhaustion in his eyes. He admits he's been buried in work, but she knows there's more to it. Sharon gently asks if it's about Summer. Chance sighs, saying it's complicated. He and Summer have been growing closer, but lately she's been distant, torn between her lingering feelings for Kyle and the future she could have with Chance. Sharon, ever the voice of calm, tells him that love in Genoa City is never straightforward. Chance smiles faintly and says he's starting to see that firsthand. He appreciates Sharon's wisdom, but there's an unspoken connection between them two, a quiet chemistry that lingers in the air each time they talk. As he leaves, Sharon watches him go, her heart heavy with the knowledge that love triangles always end in heartbreak for someone. Back at the Abbott mansion, Ashley returns unexpectedly from Paris, catching everyone off guard. Tracy rushes to greet her, but it's clear Ashley's not here for a family reunion. She's holding a folder full of documents and says she's come back because she's worried about Tucker. Apparently, he's been making bold business moves overseas that could destabilize several markets, including those tied to Genoa. Jack groans. Tucker's shadow looms over every corner of their lives. Ashley admits she still has feelings for him, but she's also afraid of what he's planning. Jack tells her to stay out of it, but Ashley refuses. She says that if Tucker's crossing lines again, she needs to stop him before he ruins everything. Diane watches silently from the doorway, her expression unreadable. She knows that Tucker's chaos always spills over into the Abbott family, and she wonders whether Ashley's return will reopen old wounds they've barely begun to heal. Meanwhile, Tucker himself is in a private suite at the Grand Phoenix, pacing and muttering as he talks on the phone. He's furious that his latest acquisition deal has been delayed. Audra arrives, wearing that trademark smirk that tells him she's got information worth his attention. She updates him about Kyle's ambitions, and how he might be manipulated into taking bold steps against Jack. Tucker's interest peaks immediately. He says that if Kyle's willing to challenge Jack, maybe it's time for a little push from the outside. Audra reminds him that alliances with Abbotts never end well, but Tucker shrugs it off. For him, destruction is just another form of creation. As they toast to their latest scheme, there's an undeniable tension between them, half attraction, half distrust, because both know the other would sell them out in a heartbeat if it meant gaining power. At Crimson Lights later that afternoon, Mariah and Tessa are sitting with their baby Aria, laughing softly until Tessa's phone rings. It's her music producer from Portland, and the conversation changes everything. After hanging up, she looks at Mariah with wide eyes and says she's been offered a major opportunity to tour again. Mariah's excitement is short-lived when Tessa adds that it would mean leaving Genoa City for several months. Mariah struggles to hide her disappointment. She knows how much singing means to Tessa, but she can't imagine being apart, especially with Aria still so young. The emotional tension builds as Tessa insists she can balance both her family and career, while Mariah argues that some choices can't have it both ways. The scene ends with Tessa whispering that she can't give up her dream again, not even for love. Mariah's eyes well with tears, realizing that love sometimes asks for more than anyone should have to give. Elsewhere, Victor Newman sits in his iconic chair at the Newman Ranch, steepling his fingers and listening to Nick report on the latest company updates. Adam soon enters, and immediately the atmosphere thickens with rivalry. Victor announces that he's considering restructuring Newman Enterprises, a move that could shift power among his children. Nick looks wary while Adam smirks, suspecting that Victor's playing another psychological game. When Victoria storms in, angry and emotional after her fight with Nate, the family tension hits a boiling point. She accuses Victor of undermining her by encouraging Adam to make a power grab, but Victor dismisses her accusation, saying she's letting emotions cloud her judgment. The argument escalates until Nick steps between them, trying to calm things down. Victor eventually silences them all with one cold declaration. If my children can't act like leaders, maybe it's time I remind everyone who built this empire. The statement leaves the room in stunned silence, the family fractured yet again by pride and ambition. Later that evening at the Abbott estate, Jack receives a mysterious delivery, an unmarked envelope containing photos of Kyle and Audra meeting secretly at society. His hands tremble as he flips through them. Diane immediately asks what's wrong, but Jack refuses to answer. Instead, he storms upstairs, muttering that betrayal runs deep in this family. Downstairs, Tracy comforts Ashley, who's trying to reach Tucker but can't get through. She admits she's afraid that if Tucker's using Kyle to get at Jack, then everything could implode. The sisters share a rare moment of vulnerability, realizing how exhausting it is to constantly fight for stability in a town built on manipulation and secrets. Meanwhile, at Newman Media, Nate returns to pack up his office. Elena shows up unexpectedly, saying she heard he was leaving Victoria. The air between them is thick with unresolved feelings. Nate admits he's tired of living in the shadows of the Newmans, tired of proving himself to people who'll never trust him. Elena says she always knew he was better than that, and there's a brief spark between them, the kind that reminds them of what they once shared. But Nate pulls back, saying he's not ready to go backward. As he leaves, Elena watches him go, unsure if this time he's really gone for good. Back at the Grand Phoenix, Phyllis eavesdrops near Tucker's suite door, hearing snippets of his conversation about taking Jabot down from the inside. She immediately calls Jack, telling him he needs to meet her alone. When Jack arrives, Phyllis shows him what she overheard, warning him that Tucker and Audra are plotting something big. Jack, already shaken by the photos of Kyle and Audra, feels the walls closing in. He realizes that his family's greatest enemy might not be Tucker, but the betrayal festering within their own bloodline. Phyllis, seeing his anguish, softens and tells him she'll help however she can. Jack thanks her, though his eyes are filled with fury and heartbreak. As he walks away, Phyllis murmurs to herself that Genoa City never changes. People just find new ways to hurt each other. Night falls over the city and we cut to Crimson Lights again, where Sharon closes up shop. She glances at a photo of Ray on the counter and whispers that she still feels his presence watching over her. Just then, Chance returns looking lost. Sharon offers him coffee, and the two sit in quiet companionship. He tells her that sometimes he feels like everyone in this town is fighting a war they can't win. Sharon smiles softly and says, "That's Genoa City, Chance. Love, power, and lies. It's the only language we speak." They share a moment of understanding, something deeper than words. But outside, someone watches them through the window. A shadowy figure whose identity isn't revealed, adding an air of suspense that promises more trouble ahead. As the episode draws toward its close, Victoria stands in her office, staring out the window into the night sky. She picks up her phone and makes a call. "It's time," she says. "If Nate wants out, then I'll replace him with someone who knows how to be loyal." The person on the other end responds, but their voice isn't heard. All we see is Victoria's steely gaze as she vows to take back control of her life, no matter who gets hurt. Across town, Kyle and Audra toast to their new alliance, unaware that Jack has already begun plotting a counterattack. Ashley drives off to confront Tucker, while Mariah watches Tessa pack her bags, fighting tears as she realizes that love and dreams don't always walk the same path. In the final moments, the camera pans through the empty streets of Genoa City, stopping briefly on the Newman Ranch, where Victor sits alone sipping brandy. He stares at a family photo on his desk and murmurs, "The game never ends." Then the scene cuts to the Abbott mansion, where Jack burns the photos of Kyle and Audra in the fireplace, his face a mixture of sorrow and resolve. The flames crackle, symbolizing both destruction and rebirth. The episode ends on that haunting note, a quiet before the inevitable storm that will tear through Genoa City in the days to come. The faint, ever-present hum of the Genoa City Memorial Hospital waiting room seemed to amplify the silence between Victor and Nikki Newman, a silence so heavy and profound it felt like a physical presence in the sterile air, a third party to their shared, unspoken dread as they sat rigidly in the unforgiving plastic chairs, their postures a study in aristocratic endurance undercut by very human fear, waiting for any word, any sign, any minuscule update on the condition of their grandson, who lay somewhere beyond the ominous double doors in a room filled with beeping monitors and the hushed, urgent voices of medical professionals, his small body fighting a battle they could not wage for him, a situation made all the more torturous by its sudden and violent nature, a phone call in the dead of night that had shattered the calm of the Newman estate and sent them rushing into the dark, a frantic race against time that now felt like it had happened in another lifetime. Yet the cold, antiseptic smell of the hospital corridor was a brutal reminder that it was their current grim reality. Victoria, pale and trembling, a stark contrast to her usual composed and commanding demeanor, was a portrait of maternal anguish, her fingers nervously twisting the fabric of her coat as she paced a worn path on the linoleum floor, her mind undoubtedly replaying every moment of the evening, every decision, every what if that could have prevented this tragedy, while Nate, standing a respectful distance away, his own expression etched with concern and a sense of helplessness, occasionally offered a quiet word of support that she seemed too lost in her own private hell to fully register, the chasm between her public strength and private vulnerability on full, heartbreaking display for anyone in the family to see, though only Victor and Nikki were there to witness it, the rest of the family having been notified and presumably on their way, turning this private vigil into an impending, high-stakes family gathering fraught with its own history and tensions. The tranquility of the Newman Ranch, a place usually synonymous with power and impenetrable security, had been violently pierced, and the fallout was radiating across the city, with Adam Newman, having just received the frantic call from his mother, his own heart seizing with an unexpected and ferocious protectiveness for a nephew he had a complicated relationship with, was already striding purposefully through the grand foyer of his own home, grabbing his car keys with a grim determination, his mind racing not only with concern for the boy but with the immediate, cynical suspicion that this was no simple accident, that in the world of the Newmans, misfortune was rarely random and never innocent, a lesson he had learned through bitter, personal experience time and again. Meanwhile, across town, in the opulent but currently tense confines of the Abbott mansion, Jack Abbott sat in his study, the phone pressed to his ear, his face a mask of grave concern as he listened to Nikki's hushed, strained voice on the other end of the line, the news landing with a sickening thud in the pit of his stomach, a reminder that despite the fierce business rivalries and personal betrayals that often defined their relationship, there were lines that were never crossed, and the serious illness of a child was one of them, a universal vulnerability that transcended corporate warfare and family feuds, prompting him to immediately begin making calls, his voice a low, steady command, setting in motion the vast Abbott resources to offer whatever discreet assistance might be needed, whether it was securing the hospital from press intrusion or providing any specialist medical counsel, a gesture of old-world loyalty that he knew Victor would grudgingly accept in a crisis of this magnitude. This act of unexpected solidarity from the Abbott patriarch stood in stark contrast to the scene unfolding at the Grand Phoenix, where Chloe Mitchell was frantically trying to piece together the timeline of the evening with a frantic Sally Spectra, who was veering between sheer panic and a simmering rage, her thoughts immediately flying to her own daughter, little Susie, and the terrifying fragility of life, while Chloe, ever the pragmatic and fiercely loyal friend, was already in problem-solving mode, her fingers flying across her laptop keyboard, cross-referencing security footage from the Newman estate's perimeter with any reports of suspicious activity in the area, her expression growing grimmer with each passing minute as a pattern, or perhaps the terrifying lack of one, began to emerge from the digital chaos. Simultaneously, at the dimly lit dive bar that served as a neutral, if seedy territory for many of Genoa City's less savory dealings, Kyle Abbott found himself in a tense, clandestine meeting with a familiar but unwelcome face from his past, the conversation a low, hissed exchange of accusations and veiled threats, the air thick with the scent of stale beer and regret, the personal stakes of their discussion clashing violently with the looming, citywide concern for the Newman family, forcing Kyle to compartmentalize his own escalating crisis in order to maintain the facade of Abbott dignity and control, a skill he had honed over years but one that felt particularly brittle and fragile under the weight of the night's events. Back at the hospital, the fragile calm was shattered by the arrival of Nick Newman, who burst through the emergency room doors with the force of a hurricane, his face a storm of fear and fury, his eyes immediately finding his parents and sister, the unasked question hanging in the air between them until Victoria finally broke, rushing into her brother's arms as sobs she had been bravely holding back finally racked her body, the sight of the typically resilient Newman siblings in such a raw state of shared grief causing even the hardened nursing staff to glance away, offering a moment of privacy in the very public fishbowl of their crisis. It was in this moment of collective vulnerability that Victor's demeanor shifted from worried grandfather to the formidable mustache the city feared. His voice a low, dangerous growl as he pulled out his phone and issued a single terse command to his head of security, a command that would unleash the full, formidable investigative might of Newman Enterprises upon the city, a silent, invisible net designed to catch anyone even remotely connected to the incident, his love for his family, transforming in an instant into a cold, ruthless promise of retribution against whoever was responsible, a promise that hung in the air more tangibly than any prayer. This single-minded focus on external threats, however, blinded them to the internal fissures that were beginning to show, as Adam finally arrived, his entrance more subdued than Nick's but no less intense, his gaze scanning the room, taking in the scene of familial unity and immediately feeling the old, familiar sting of being the outsider, the perceived wild card, the son whose motives were always suspect, a perception that was only reinforced when Victor's eyes met his, the look exchanged between them not one of shared concern, but one of immediate, unspoken accusation and a deep-seated mistrust that not even a family emergency could fully bridge, creating a schism in the waiting room that was as palpable as the worry for the child fighting for his life down the hall. As the night wore on, the layers of complexity continued to multiply, with Ashley Abbott, having been informed by Jack, making a discreet call to Tracy, the news sending ripples through the Abbott family framework and prompting a discussion about the delicate balance of public sympathy and private strategy, while in Chancellor Park, a shadowy figure observed the comings and goings at the hospital from a safe distance, their face obscured by darkness, their motives completely unknown, but their presence a chilling confirmation that the night's events were indeed part of a larger, more sinister design, a puzzle whose pieces were still scattered across the glittering, deceptive landscape of the city. The emotional epicenter of the crisis, however, remained firmly within the fourth-floor ICU waiting area, where Victoria, now slightly more composed but with eyes red-rimmed and hollow, finally spoke the fear that had been haunting her since the moment she received the call, her voice a broken whisper as she confessed to Nikki that she felt this was somehow a punishment, a karmic retribution for past sins and corporate ruthlessness, a mother's guilt manifesting in the most profound and irrational of ways, a sentiment that Nikki, with her own long and complicated history of struggles and redemption, could only listen to with a heart full of empathy, clutching her daughter's hand and offering the only solace she could, the simple, powerful reassurance of a mother's presence, a bond that momentarily superseded the vast wealth and power their name represented. This intimate moment was interrupted by the arrival of the attending physician, a serious-faced woman whose calm,